and sports streams. Best of all, the TalkStream Live directory is free and there's never a login required. Remember TalkStreamLive.com, the fastest route between you and your favorite talk radio show.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Rhys Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, David Wilcock and Corey Goode are with us for the duration, and enough of the idle chit-chat. Let's just get right back to it. Hey, David, do you like that bumper music?
Yeah. I think you did a great job on that one, buddy.
Yeah, well, it's not me, but thank you for the...
Oh, it's not? Okay.
Hey, okay, let's put our serious hats on. This is some serious things to discuss. Corey, whistleblowers are supposed to be faceless, nameless, and protected. You got outed. We don't need to go into that. That's in the past. But how has that changed your life?
Well, it hasn't been easy. I have a wife and two children. It has affected a career that I had that allowed me to provide for them. I was able to provide a very comfortable life for them, and it affected that career dramatically. And have
you been followed? I don't want to make light of this, but have you been followed? Any mysterious cars outside of the house, clicking on the phones? Just that basic frightening stuff. Any of that going on?
Well, I've had incidents of people approaching me, telling me that I shouldn't talk so much, that I have a big mouth. I think I told this incident, spoke about this incident in my first or second audio interview. A person approached me when I was at a restaurant, and I've even had my very own stalkers, public stalkers, who, after I was outed, I hadn't had the opportunity to take the security measures I would like to, and they were able to find out where I lived.
Right.
And, I went out to my mailbox and found I had a note and a bullet in my mailbox. And needless to say, after that, my children used to argue over who got to check the mail.
Right.
After that incident, children don't get to check the mail anymore.
Well, Corey, when you flew out to see me for the first time and we were going to tape your interview, a guy in the airport offered you a shot of Jägermeister.
Yes. I didn't know if we were going to talk about this one, but
I think we should.
Okay.
What happened?
I was at, I believe it was TGI Fridays at Love Field in Dallas, the airport in Dallas, and my flight was being perpetually
delayed,
and it was crazy. So I went finally. I sat at the bar at I believe TGI Fridays, and I was sitting there having a beer and trying to unwind after dealing with the airlines. And this guy comes up and sits next to me, and as I paid for my beer, he saw my Texas State Guard military ID, and he said, "Oh, you're military. I want to buy you a drink." And I was, he ordered Jägermeisters, and I said, I don't drink hard liquor. I don't want it. And he put his hand over the top of the shot glass and slid it over in front of me, and said, "No, do a shot with me." And I was like, I don't drink hard liquor. And this young guy that was sitting next to me, that was drinking beer, said, "I'll take it." I said, "Sure," and I slid it right over to him. And the guy tensed up that bought me the drink, and the young guy, I mean, he looked barely old enough to drink, took the shot.
No. Baldy also said, no, that's for him. That's for him.
Yeah. And he protested, but the kid just took the shot, and he had just finished a big meal, and the kid was sitting there, and just like moments after he takes a shot, he just projectile vomits.
Oh, man.
I mean, as if almost like it was Epicac in the glass instead of
right
Jägermeister.
What happened to the guy that bought the drink? Did he disappear?
He disappeared into the crowd, and I never saw him again. He just disappeared. So
yeah, let that be a lesson to you. Unless it's either David or I buying you the drink, that's you politely decline everything from here on out. Well, okay, now let's start.
Well, Jimmy, I'll just also kick in quickly that
sure.
I have had numerous severe death threats, including personal death threats from the Rothschilds to me through 4 different sources, saying that if I keep doing this, they're going to try to take me out. And they would if they could. And that's one of the things that we got to say for all the skeptics out there is this is a spiritual battle. And the good guys that are in this battle are what you could think of as the archangels, seraphim, and cherubim in the Bible. And so if you follow positive spiritual practices, these threatening things can happen that are scary, but they can't actually take you out.
Well, let me just say this. If you stop getting those emails or those warnings or those drinks or whatever, then that means you don't matter. Always remember that. If I stop getting emails, because I get 10 a day, we're going to shut down your show. We're going to shut down your website. You need to stop. You know what? That just means we're on pitch. That's all that means, and so always remember that. If you stop getting the emails, that's when you worry. Okay. As long as you get them, that just means that you matter. And that being said, Corey, tell me how, back when you were 6 years old, for the audience, and it's just an amazing event. How did you get from Texas to the LOC? Oh, by the way, audience, we're going to be talking about the LOC. We'll tell you what that is. The ICC. We'll get into that. We'll get into the Super Federation. All of that will be explained. Fear not. So we're going to start here with your first trip from Texas to the LOC. What happened that day?
Well, that the trips off-world didn't start until later on. When I was 6, they would bring me to Carswell Air Force Base and a couple other locations that were usually closed down or abandoned commercial real estate buildings that they took our group to do training and testing. And all this training and testing was to get this group of children as they were growing up to a point to where we would all be drafted off into various different programs. Some of us would go into the secret space program, some of us would go into military black ops, and some of us would go to work for some of these syndicates that people call the Cabal and the Illuminati.
Mm-hmm. And from Carswell, weren't you transported underground? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
yes.
So tell me how that went.
Yes, I don't want to bring this. I've received emails from a few people that worked at the base during that time frame, and I described the back gate that we entered in through, drove, crossed a runway, and then drove parallel to a runway, and then we drove into a hangar where cars parked, and on the wall was a giant wooden model that had Corsair written on it, and it was a giant bomber on it. And then we would, then I was told that by one of these people that it was a security or one of the headquarters buildings. And we walked back to the back, and there was a large service elevator that took us down a few floors, and then we were in a kind of, during that time frame was the Cold War. And in case of nuclear attacks, they had below-ground facilities. And then we would walk down a series of halls, one of which was guarded, a couple of doors that were guarded, and by one man sitting at a table, one soldier or airman. And then we'd pass through those doors and go, and there would be further elevators that would take you deeper down, and that would take you down to the underground tram system.
Was it the same time or the same steps every single time? Was it always the Carswell, the same hallways, same elevators? Did you ever go to a different facility, or was it always?
No, that they would take us to different buildings quite often, and a lot of the times they were larger commercial buildings that were not in use, that they had set up for, had their equipment set up in for training or testing, different, whatever scenario they needed them for. And these locations could be closer to where we lived. I lived in the North Dallas area, so it was always about a 50-minute drive to Carswell Air Force Base. So it was a little bit of a drive when they would take us in the vans. And so they had facilities that I guess were mobile, that they could move around and set up in different commercial buildings that they had access to. And they would make use of those that were closer to different groups.
Were you transported underground outside of the state of Texas, or do you think that you were always inside of Texas?
No, we were definitely transported outside of Texas. There were no signs that said you
right
here or there, but there would be a dramatic change in people's accents and demeanors and looks. So there were times that we definitely seemed to be in places like Australia or Europe, and or under Europe and Australia. And one of the things that was mentioned, I remember mentioned when I was young, was that how like out at sea, there's a certain amount of miles from shore, it's international waters, that international, there's no, I guess, national laws that you have to worry about. It's international laws. The same goes for a certain depth underground. And a certain amount of depth underground you go, you're not considered in that country anymore.
Oh, that's interesting. I never quite looked at it that way, but I suppose the same would apply. Yeah. If you're in the ISS, what country are you in? I never even thought about that. That's a good point. Corey, so your first trip off-world, tell us about that, and where do you think you were when that happened?
Well, before I was actually somewhat drafted, although I did sign papers before I was legally old enough to, I was already being utilized as an intuitive empath, and I had been brought to off-world to these Super Federation meetings in a support role, to where I was there with two other. There was always three intuitive empaths. They always had three of us to triangulate for triangulation purposes, and they had us at the Super Federation conference because the Earth. We finally, I guess, this is going a little bit. Human beings of Earth finally got a delegation seat at this Super Federation. Many of the ET groups there did not like this, were not approving of this, but nonetheless, it was a delegation role that many of these different secret Earth government leaders would rotate into. And there would be a delegate that would rotate in and sit in the chair, and then there would be always three intuitive empaths, and we would rotate in as well. So I wasn't always there. They would rotate us in, and we would sit to the side and to the front of this delegate. And then the delegate had an advisor that would stand over their left shoulder, and that would be the delegation group that would be allowed on the floor.
Where did this delegation meet?
It was on it's a space station, a very advanced space station that is inside of a temporal rift or temporal bubble. And we would have to fly into it. It was out by the gas giants, out in around the orbits of the gas giants.
Neptune, Uranus, Jupiter. Okay, well, okay, let's back up though. I want to know how you got there. We jumped ahead. We jumped way ahead.
Okay.
So how did you get there? That's
okay.
That's where we were.
Okay. Now we're going to get to where we start first going to the LOC. We would be portaled to the LOC through the there were the underground tram system that would portal us, and there was also a area that they would take us to through the underground tram system that you would walk through. But both of them would end up at the LOC, where you would then get into a spacecraft, embark onto a spacecraft, and then fly from the LOC to this temporal rift or bubble that pretty much hid or protected this.
No, I understand. And the LOC is the Lunar Operation Command. That's what, or center, command center.
Right.
And how long were you there before you were transported out? Did you spend a month there, a day there, an hour?
No, these were short trips. These would be like the meetings would be anywhere from like 3-5 hours, to including the meeting and the travel time.
So and tell me,
it would be like I guess you would call it a day trip.
A day trip. So what was the atmosphere like? I'm picturing, the commander up talking to an audience, a classroom, a room, kind of like the movie Top Gun. I'm kind of picturing that, where you're being addressed on what this mission is going to be. Did you have, cafeterias? What was the daily life like there? How were you treated when you were there?
When we were at the LOC?
Yes.
Well, when we were at the LOC, at this point, we were just escorted directly to the craft. We, as intuitive empaths in the support role, we were not given any information. We were there just to detect any type of, deception or danger. And when we were there, when we were at the Super Federation conferences, we didn't understand anything that was going on. We didn't understand. We had no idea what was going on.
Why was that? Was there a language barrier, something lost in translation?
Yes. The beings that were there didn't interface with us directly, which is what they call telepathic one-on-one communication. And there was also a common language that was spoken that was very monotone, a very strange language that each delegate, when they would rotate up to the podium and talk, they all spoke this language, while there was another being that stood up and did some strange sort of sign language that looked almost like Native American sign language. It was very peculiar. And we would sit there and hold these devices in our hands that just looked like a piece of plexiglass.
Mm-hmm.
And they were called smart glass pads. And you would put them on your hands, and you could see your fingertips through them, and they were activated with consciousness or with a mental component. And then they would go opaque, and then whatever language you speak, you would begin to see information appearing in that language, and you would have access to a database of information, and they would have us browsing this database of information to keep our conscious mind busy and also gathering information from the database while our subconscious mind or higher self and training kicked in so that our intuitive empath abilities were picking up anything in the room that we should be picking up.
That's it. That's interesting. I'm picturing something like the United Nations, right, where you have all of these different cultures together. Were you? Did you have some type of headset or some type of translation device?
Nope.
What about everybody else? Were they all speaking the same language, or was somebody translating for them?
What is interesting is I did not know until quite recently, when I got to sit in one of those chairs myself, that when you sit in that chair, you understand the language that is being spoken.
Ah, I got you. And what were they? This is one of the crucial things I've always wanted to ask you. What was it that they were discussing? Were they discussing issues in the universe, or were they discussing Earth?
They were discussing this grand experiment, which we are a major part of. And of this group, there was usually 40 there. Sometimes there were more, up to 60, a little over 60 different beings, groups there. And that were working together, and they had 22 different programs that, since our inception, or some would say our creation, they have been genetically engineering and altering us. They have been interfering in our social and spiritual affairs. Mm-hmm. And they are also a part of this grand experiment. They, some of these groups are incarnating into our society, into human bodies, and they're very much a part of this huge what is called the grand experiment. And this is the overall topic of this experiment.
Sure. Was the same experiment that they are doing here, are they doing it also on other off-world planets? Is the same thing being replicated across the universe? We're just a small piece of it?
From what I had gathered, this grand experiment is very important to the rest of our galaxy and other galaxies, but I do not know for certain if they are repeating the same experiment. I don't see why they wouldn't on other star systems.
Were you ever able to intermingle or communicate with any other species?
Not when I was in that role. When I was in that role, I was oblivious to what was going on. When they would take us back, we would go through debriefing. Mm-hmm. And the debriefing was very bland because, we really didn't know much. And then we were sent back. We served our purpose.
Were you okay?
Later on, when I became a delegate myself, yes, indeed, I did. The beings there that would ignore me when I was a teenager,
right,
being an intuitive empath support, were now interested in me and interested in interfacing with me, and did so.
How so?
One-on-one, they would interface telepathically.
Would it be about personal issues? Was it about you personally, or was it about the news back on planet Earth? What was that like?
Well, it was generally about they were communicating what they are contributing to this grand experiment, or the 22, whatever, if they're a part of one of these 22 experiments or ongoing programs, they would try to interface and give a hard sell about what they're contributing to humanity, or the great experiment. But there were some incidents to where they did pick up on some, I guess, personal thoughts, and communicated on that level.
That's interesting. Did you feel, I want to actually get back to a personal thought. I'm sure they found that interesting. So don't let my mind get away from that. Did you ever feel threatened? Did you ever feel like it was a negative atmosphere? I hate to go to the two key words, benevolent, but how did you feel the overall atmosphere was? Was it positive? Was it negative? Did you feel dread? Did you feel okay?
Okay, there was a big difference for when I was with the secret Earth government syndicates and groups as an intuitive empath. There was an obvious feeling of they did not want us there, of disdain, I guess you would say, towards us. But when I was there under a different capacity, there was no angst, anxiety, or negative feelings, or feelings of what you would consider hatred or negativity at all.
When we hear from, and David, jump in here if you would.
Sure.
There's almost a line in the sand out there about ET's interference being a positive thing, one being a negative thing, a war being waged in between the two of them, fighting over us, not fighting over us. They're here for, they want us to grow and love each other and look at each other and bring down barriers. And then there's the other part that could care less about humanity in general, that we're beneath them. What is the real message? What is really going on?
Well, I think that to try to pick somebody off the surface of Earth and then hold them in front of a group of extraterrestrials and say, this represents people on Earth, this person is Earth, Well, who are you going to pick? You could pick some guy from Skid Row in New York City who's missing most of his teeth and reeks of, beer and puke.
Kind of like me. Yeah. That wouldn't be a good idea. I don't think I would represent Earth too well. Point taken, David. I get it.
So in saying that, I want to say, too, that there are a wide variety of extraterrestrials with a wide variety of agendas. Some of them are more trending positive. Some of them are more trending negative. Some of them are extremely negative. Then that's all kind of in like what you would call a fourth density category, which is the level above our own. Right. As you progress in your universal evolution. As you get into fifth density and especially sixth density, these groups now become somebody that you're not usually going to see. And one of the things that has been really significant that I want to make sure we cover, because I see how fast we're running out of time,
yes,
is the arrival of these massive spheres in our solar system. And I want to point your listeners to something. Everybody's saying, David has no evidence, David has no evidence, okay? I just put up an article, so go to divinecosmos.com, DIVINECOSMOS.com. In less than 2 hours, it's already had 1,500 Facebook likes and over 8,500 hits, okay? This article shows you the film of these spheres from NASA when they were first coming in the late 1990s, including a very dramatic little animated GIF of two spheres colliding with the sun and creating a massive coronal mass ejection immediately afterwards, which NASA says is unrelated. Okay, now, these sphere beings showed up, and it appears that we're finally dealing with somebody a lot higher than fourth density who is here to ultimately restore our planet and get rid of the bad guys and clear us from financial tyranny and free up all this classified technology. And that's really the core of what Corey seems to be doing, is acting as a delegate and a liaison on behalf of these new beings who have completely overturned the apple cart for the space program negative groups that we would call the Illuminati here on Earth.
Well, and certainly everything that you've been talking about over the last couple of years on this program and others, David, and you and I personally talking to as well, about the the global financial situation, and things certainly seem to have turned upside down over the last week. And it's something I want you to come back on the show in a couple of weeks, and we need to address this directly, if you don't mind.
It's accelerating to warp drive speed.
Yes,
we had the Dow drop 530 points on Friday, and Monday morning, this morning, it dropped another 1,000 points and closed about 700 down.
Yeah,
this is exactly how the 2008 Lehman Brothers collapse started, and believe me, this perfectly dovetails with what Corey has been saying online and what my own insiders separate from Corey have been saying. Buckle your seatbelt, get ready, because you're going to see epic changes. And the only way we can get rid of the bad guys is to have the public get pissed off enough that they want the change. So it does appear that this is what's just starting to happen.
Corey, when was the last time that you made contact with the AVIANS?
That would have been let me see, I can look right here. It was on the 19th.
Of August?
Yes.
Did you tell them you were going to be on this show? Just kidding. Just wondering if they're tuning in.
I did want to make. I did.
I'm not, guys. I'm not making light of it, by the way. Okay?
No, I know.
Okay.
And there is something I wanted to make clear, that the when the spheres started to appear in the solar system,
yes,
across the Pentagon and all these different groups, they all got excited. They were saying the Sumerian gods have returned. They were all excited, and they started trying to hail these spheres. They tried to make contact with them. They were saying, all right, our Illuminati gods are here. We're ready to, kick butt and take names. Well, they had a rude awakening. This group was not who they thought they were, and they were a positive group. And this group is not here to save us. They are not here to deliver us from evil. They are here to deliver us a message and to even out the playing fields, I guess you could say. And we have to take responsibility and be our own saviors.
When you okay, couple of direct questions. When you were back sitting at the table at the Super Federation, and you had all of these, how many different races were in front of you from around the universe? Was it in the hundreds? Was it in the thousands? How many were in front of you?
Well, when I was a intuitive empath support, usually there was about 40 different groups, but sometimes there were up to 60, a little over 60.
Were one of these the Blue Avians?
No.
That's an interesting point, and you understand why I'm driving this home. That's an interesting thing. So when the Blue Avians are here, who are they representing? Are they part of the Federation now?
No. The Blue Avians have refused to meet directly with all these groups, and they've said that, and some of these groups are very positive, but they said the most positive of these groups they still have agendas, and they are still service to self.
Do the Blue Avians hold, are they, for lack of a better word, please understand, but are they superior in both intelligence and numbers, that they don't need the Federation and they can ignore the Federation? Are they in a position of power to make that kind of decision?
Absolutely. They had the ability to quarantine the entire solar system to where all of these beings that were here were now trapped in their embassies that are here on Earth, under the oceans, underground, on various moons. All of these different groups that are here were trapped. They could not leave the solar system.
Why is that? Do you know?
Well, they have erected a barrier. They call it that. It's called it's being referenced by the Secret Space Program as the outer barrier, and it is out way past the Oort cloud and out. It's very far out there, and it is a barrier that does not allow any beings or craft to enter or leave the solar system. They basically wanted to make sure that every group that has interfered and with the affairs of humanity were going to be here at the end of what they're calling some great cycle, so that they would be held accountable and I guess.
Okay. I understand.
Okay.
Now the time period that I've heard you reference before has been around 250,000 years. These 22 DNA interferences and experiments that have been going on reach back. Is that the right number? 250,000 years? Was that the first? I would say experiment here on Earth. Was it 250,000 years ago?
I believe it was like 340,000 years ago, or something of that nature.
Well, that's an interesting number, and David knows why too. You have not only the stories of the Anunnaki and Sumerian culture and Egyptian culture going back in some instances hundreds of thousands of years, 400,000 years, 300,000 years. But certainly man himself, you, me, David, our audience, became who we are today about 150,000. We just appeared out of nowhere. And I don't see this as being a coincidence now. Am I on the right track with that thinking?
Absolutely.
David?
Sure. There is more and more evidence actually available to the public about the mitochondrial Eve and the DNA atom both popping up 250,000 years ago, almost at the same time. And they're not explaining why this is, but there are a whole bunch of breadcrumbs that are being put out there right now. And another thing that I really want to add here is that the cabal is planning on actually giving us a form of disclosure which will probably reveal Anunnaki and things like this in a much more public way as a sort of last-ditch effort to try to save their butts when it really gets hot and heavy for them, which is happening soon. And so there is a whole through line of data where they're putting out these things into the world, like saying that there's a pyramid on the Ceres asteroid in the asteroid belt around Jupiter.
Right.
A pyramid that's glowing. Okay, a glowing pyramid, and that was announced by NASA. They announced that Mars had oceans that were 2 miles deep across half of its surface. Okay, this is not stuff that I'm making up. These are NASA press releases, and they are getting us ready, according to what Corey's sources have said, for a sort of controlled hangout of disclosure where they're going to announce what they call the ancient builder race, which is a group that's very ancient, hundreds of millions of years old, that came through our solar system and built a whole lot of structures all throughout the solar system, inside moons, on the surface, and inside planets, and also cities inside the Earth that are still there, that have been reoccupied, that people are living in now.
Are they going to do it, David, with or Corey? Are they going to do it with an announcement? Are they going to bring forth some hard evidence, like Sumerian tablets or Anunnaki mythos, or things from the past on our own planet? How do they plan to do that? Because we can't take things at face value anymore when it comes from getting knowledge, any mass media announcement.
Let me just take a stab at that, and then Corey can kick in what he wants. This is something where you got to remember, I have a lot more contacts than just the ones that Corey has. And so I'm combining all this different stuff together.
Sure.
We're hearing that there are multiple plans in place for how they could do disclosure. They have not committed to any one plan. For example, they've got the idea that there is a whale-type creature on Saturn's moon Titan, and they've put that out there. They've got the water on Mars and particular ruins on Mars they could bring out. They've got the spots on Ceres they could bring out. They've got a jet black object orbiting Pluto that appears to be a moon, but its moons aren't black. They could bring that one out. And I just watched Man of Steel again last night, the superhero flick, and I couldn't believe it, because one of the plans I heard they might do is openly showing us a UFO coming in from outside the solar system and making it definitive and just putting it all over the airwaves. And that's exactly what happens in Man of Steel. It freaked me out when I saw that again after what I now know.
Yeah,
and that's predictive programming. They're setting us up for it.
Sure. Well, even Transformers or whatever, any one of those films is warming us up for that.
Absolutely.
Corey, how do you think they're going to do it?
Well, I was actually...
Well, actually, Corey, I asked you the wrong question. Not how do you think you're going to... How do you know that they are going to do it? What evidence do you have?
Well, I was brought to a meeting with I guess I would call him a peer. His pseudonym is Lieutenant Colonel Gonzalez. I have to be careful because I almost always say his real name.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It would not be good. And we were brought to it was a large meeting in Europe that this group called the Committee of 200 was at. And they were wanting us to negotiate on their behalf a partial disclosure to where the certain technologies such as certain free energy and other health and medical technologies would be released, and the existence of extraterrestrials and the fact that they've been interacting with us would be released. But all of the evidence that has been gathered about the different ET groups and the cabal or secret Earth government syndicates' crimes against humanity would be put on the back burner for another 50 years. And, to kind of kick the can and save their butts from tribunals and that kind of thing. So that was one of their latest negotiations. And what they're trying to do is they want to do there was I announced this several months ago that there's going to be a huge disinformation battle and a battle over the control over the narrative of disclosure. And as David said, there are several. They have several different bullets that they can load in the chamber, and it's which bullet they load in the chamber is going to depend on how things fall in the public, on what kind of information surfaces, what happens, and what bullet they think is going to be the magic bullet that is going to buy them more time.
Is it going to be through the United Nations?
That is where they most likely would. It would most likely be a United Nations announcement with representatives from major religions in accompaniment with them.
Would now I'm just imagining here, is that type of disclosure, and I would imagine it being at the United Nations, if that type of disclosure goes down, are they going to parade E.T. up on stage and stand behind, the head of the United Nations, or stand behind Obama? Or is this going to be spoken and without anything like that happening?
Well, there's several different scenarios have been, all these different arrows have been put in the quiver.
Sure.
So, there's all these different possibilities, and they're ready to play any card. But what they're trying to stave off and prevent is a full disclosure event. And a full disclosure event is, people think of disclosure and they think of, okay, someone's going to come and they're finally going to say, yes, there are aliens. Okay, we have disclosure. No. Full disclosure is everything. We find out our true history, not this manipulated history that the mainstream has been brainwashed with. We're going to find out about all of these crazy crimes against humanity that I've given a little bit of information about. That includes a galactic slave trade of these cabal groups trading off human beings as commodities in a barter system with some of these negative ET groups in exchange for technologies and other biological specimens in trade for their studies.
Yeah, let me jump in right there, because when you suggest something like that, the normal reaction is today's technology. What the advancements that we have made in the last 50 years or 100 years. But were they doing these types of barter deals? Did they do it 5,000 years ago for fire? Did they do it 2,000 years ago for the wheel? And I'm not being facetious here. Did they do a trade for the Gutenberg printing press?
Well, no, I can answer that. We were pretty much at their mercy. They could come and go as they wished. There were certain groups that took, responsibility at different times. There were different ET groups did take guardianship over the planet and, I guess, protect its resources in certain ways when back in the ancient past when we were considered their property or they considered us their property. But as things went along and we started getting more sophisticated and realized when there were some alien crashes and the military-industrial complex and all these different groups started making contact with them, they made agreements with them. Hey, you can abduct and experiment on human beings. Give us a list of who you're abducting and give us some toys and trinkets and it'll all be good, and we can't stop you anyway, so we might as well get something out of it. Well, after they developed a secret space program and the ability to police our biosphere to a certain degree, then these people controlling the secret space programs at that time, which were these cabal groups, they decided, hey, human beings are a commodity. These groups out there want these people, obviously. They're a bunch of useless eaters in our book anyway. We can control who disappears and who doesn't. And then this slave trade was born. The humans started, just like as disgusting as the slave trade was back in, just going back our entire history of us enslaving each other. We started abducting our own people, taking them off planet, and trading them to ET groups in exchange for the, goods and services that we wanted. And at that point, we were able to control the environment and control who was taken or who was traded off, and instead of people just being abducted and us having no idea what was going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What would they be using us for? When I'm picturing us working in mines, I have no idea. What is it that they would be using us for?
Well, that's very good. It's not very good, but that most people, the first thing they jump to is they're eating us, which, but human beings, and this sounds strange to some people, we have become very well known for our engineering abilities and our abilities to build and our labor abilities. So, yes, the slave labor, working in mines, building things, that kind of stuff. That's one thing. Another thing is our genetics. We have been genetically manipulated and engineered so much.
Go ahead. We're just up against a break. Go ahead and finish.
Well, let's wait till after the break.
Okay. Very good. This is Fade to Black tonight. David Wilcock and Corey Goode. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
KGRA Radio. Intelligent talk.
Are you a paranormal investigator, ghost hunter, or UFO skywatcher? If so, FNGinnovations.com has the product you definitely need in your investigations kit or go bag. Introducing the Morpholite Wide Beam Tactical Flashlights that put the light where you need it most. Traditional flashlights shine a focused round beam with limited line of sight in the dark. Morpholite Tactical Flashlights change all that, utilizing a revolutionary wide beam design to enable you to see safety hazards such as hanging wires and steel, pipes, and holes in the floor you just can't see with a focused round beam. In the field, where safety is paramount, a 180-degree beam increases orientation and peripheral vision in the dark. Morpholite flashlights are ideal for investigations in abandoned facilities such as houses and hospitals, factories, caves, and tunnels. Avoid those low-hanging tree branches that poke your eyes in the woods. Visit fnginnovations.com to see a full line of tactical lights and accessories. That's fnginnovations.com.
Now you can find all your favorite talk radio shows live, all in one place at TalkStreamLive.com. Listen from anywhere, office, home, or in your car. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com and click on one of the many live talk